It begins with a silence too deep to measure, the silence before memory itself. Then, a fall of light, a time when gods still walked beneath the open sky, when mountains were young and the sea remembered its first breath. Across the planet, from the Andes to the Himalayas, from the plateaus of Turkey to the drowned plains of Sunda, there are whispers of a world that came before, a lost age of the gods. Archaeologists call it prehistory. Myth calls it the first time. Zep Tepi, the era when the sky was said to fall and the world was remade. Every ancient civilization speaks of it differently, yet always with the same wound. An age of divine teachers, of monumental works and knowledge beyond measure, ended suddenly, erased by fire, by water, or by something stranger. The question is not whether myths lie. It is whether memory can survive extinction. Hidden beneath the sands of Giza, beneath the frozen tundra of Siberia, beneath the basalt temples of India, there are fractures, anomalies in stone, in time, in story. Scientists call them coincidences. Others call them traces, fingerprints of a civilization that once touched the stars and fell. And so begins the search, not for proof, but for the echo of something greater. A pattern repeating through ages, etched in flood myths, celestial alignments, and ruins that defy the tools that supposedly built them. Was it an age of gods, or simply an age of humans whose names we have forgotten? Tonight we journey through that veil, through fragments of memory that survived the cataclysm, through the fall of skies, the burning of mountains, and the erasure of everything that once was. This is historic sleep. Welcome. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The first traces of that forgotten age are not carved in stone, but buried beneath miles of ice, sediment, and ocean. It begins with the scars of a planet. Craters older than civilization, shorelines lifted from the sea, and mountains that look as if they were once folded by a cosmic hand. Across continents, there are signatures of a disaster so immense that it fractured the memory of humankind. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas, a mysterious climatic event that began around 12,800 years ago. The Earth, warming after the last ice age, suddenly plunged back into cold in less than a generation. Temperatures dropped, megafauna vanished, and human settlements disappeared without a trace. But what caused it? A natural fluctuation? A cometary impact? Or something more deliberate, a celestial event remembered by ancient myth as the fall of the sky? In Greenland's ice cores, microscopic layers of platinum tell a story of fire. The same rare metal has been found in the sediments of North America, South Africa, and Syria, as though the planet had once been dusted by the ashes of a cosmic explosion. The theory, proposed by the Comet Research Group, suggests that fragments of a disintegrating comet struck the northern hemisphere, igniting wildfires across continents and vaporizing ice sheets in an instant. Oceans rose, clouds of soot dimmed the sun, and humanity's first civilizations, whatever form they took, were swallowed by darkness. Yet the strangest part is not the science, it's the memory. In every surviving myth, from the Popol Vuh of the Maya to the ancient Egyptian book of the heavenly cow, There are echoes of a world undone by the heavens. The sky fell, the elders said. The gods turned away. In the Greek Phaethon myth, the son of the sun lost control of his father's chariot, burning the world until Zeus struck him down. In India's Vedic hymns, Indra splits the firmament and releases floods upon the earth. In Sumerian tablets, the Anunnaki descend, reshaping the land after a storm of fire and flood. Coincidence or continuity? How could so many cultures, scattered across oceans and ages, describe the same calamity? Fire from above, deluge from below, the silence that followed? The academic explanation is diffusion, that stories traveled with migrating tribes, morphing across millennia. But to some researchers, like Graham Hancock or Randall Carlson, these myths may be something more, encrypted memories of a real cataclysm witnessed by humanity's ancestors, passed down in story because writing had not yet been reborn. When the glaciers melted, coastlines shifted. The fertile plains that might once have hosted humanity's earliest settlements are now hundreds of feet underwater. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, divers have mapped ancient walls and streets beneath the Arabian Sea. In the Gulf of Kambat, sonar scans revealed geometric structures buried in silt. Radiocarbon dating of artifacts suggested human presence long before the Indus Valley civilization. Off Yonaguni, Japan, a massive stepped monument lies under 30 meters of water, shaped like a terraced pyramid. Some say it is natural erosion. Others see tool marks in the stone. And still farther west, at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, a hill of megalithic circles carved 11,600 years ago, archaeologists unearthed the world's oldest known temple. Its builders appeared suddenly, with no known predecessors. The site was deliberately buried, as if sealed by its makers. The carvings on its pillars, vultures, serpents, scorpions, and celestial symbols, seem to record an event in the sky, a memory frozen in stone. In 2017, a study published in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry interpreted the carvings as an astronomical code, a depiction of a comet impact dated precisely to the onset of the Younger Dryas. But how could hunter-gatherers carve a sky map of such precision? How did they know which stars to align their pillars with? And why bury a temple that must have taken generations to construct? Was Göbekli Tepe a warning, a monument marking the end of one world and the rebirth of another? Even the soil remembers differently there. Beneath the top layers, researchers found black mats of carbon, the residue of global firestorms. Melt glass, nanodiamonds, and magnetic spherules have been discovered in strata of the same age around the world. Materials formed only under extreme heat and pressure. To geologists, they are the fingerprints of an impact. To mythologists, they are the ashes of the day when the gods fell silent. But perhaps the fall of the sky was not only physical, perhaps it was psychological, the collapse of memory. When the old world vanished, humanity had to begin again, piecing together fragments of knowledge, myths, and fear. Imagine survivors on the edges of devastation, tribes that remembered vast architecture, astronomy, the rhythm of the stars, but lacked the means to rebuild. Their children would inherit stories, not structures. The gods built them, they would say, and then they left. From this amnesia, civilization would rise again, in Sumer, in Egypt, in the Indus, in Peru, all within a few thousand years. Each claimed to have inherited wisdom from a time before the flood, from divine teachers, or those who came from the stars. The Egyptians called them the Neteru, the Sumerians the Anunnaki, the Greeks the Titans, or Hyperboreans. Were these simply metaphors, or faint recollections of real beings, real civilizations, whose traces eroded long before our own recorded history began? The pattern is eerily mathematical. Around 10,800 BCE, the very date of the Younger Dryas, the precessional alignment of Earth's axis shifted dramatically. Ancient monuments across the world seem to encode awareness of this celestial cycle. The orientation of the Sphinx toward Leo at dawn, the solstitial gates of Tiwanaku aligned to a different sky. Were these coincidences, or an inherited cosmic geometry, preserved through ruin and rebirth? Modern science insists on caution. There is, so far, no universally accepted proof of a lost civilization advanced before known history. Yet each decade brings anomalies harder to explain. Tool marks under glacial deposits, precision-cut granite in Puma Punku, or astronomical alignments impossible to measure without instruments. These are not certainties, only riddles. But riddles are what remain when memory burns. If an event truly erased the world once, what else might it have erased? Not just cities, but continuity, a chain of knowledge linking the dawn of humanity to the present. Every myth that speaks of a golden age might in fact be mourning. Every temple might be an elegy for what came before. The question that lingers at the edge of every excavation, every fragment of myth, is not what was lost, but who wanted it forgotten. Did nature erase that world, or did something else choose to end it? The night the sky fell may not have been a single moment. It could have been a century of slow collapse, comets fragmenting in the heavens, rains that never stopped, the trembling of continents. The survivors would have seen the stars differently after that. The constellations would no longer be stories of guidance, but of warning. And perhaps that is why the oldest temples align not with what is, but with what was. The heavens of a memory, an age of the gods that ended when the world itself was rewritten. The soil still holds the clues, but the language to read them has been lost. The myths remain, but their context is gone. All that is left are patterns, recurring, haunting, undeniable. What if the flood myths, the fire myths, the descent myths, all of them are fragments of one original story, retold after the fall? A story of memory erased, of gods who were never gods, of knowledge once human that became divine only through distance and forgetting. And somewhere, beneath the ruins and sediments of 12,000 years, the first chapter of that story still sleeps, waiting for the moment when we are ready, or willing, to remember. Beneath the stillness of the earth, memory clings to stone. To understand what was lost, we must look not at the stories that survived, but at the ruins that should not exist, the ones that defy their supposed age, that whisper of engineering, geometry, and purpose that should have been impossible for the people who built them. They are scattered across the planet like fragments of a single shattered thought. From the highlands of Peru to the deserts of Egypt, from the sunken coasts of Japan to the plains of Anatolia, the same question keeps surfacing. How could such sophistication emerge from nothing? Or did it emerge from something that came before? Let us return to Göbekli Tepe, that enigmatic temple on a hill in southeastern Turkey, which appeared fully formed at the dawn of the Holocene. Archaeologists carbon dated it to around 9600 BCE, millennia before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, before cities were supposed to exist. The site was not a village, nor a burial ground, but a deliberate complex of towering limestone pillars carved in T-shapes, arranged in perfect circles. Each pillar weighs up to 10 tons, some bearing reliefs of animals, foxes, boars, vultures, snakes, and abstract symbols that seem more like language than decoration. Yet the people who built it were supposed to be hunter-gatherers, with no metal tools, no wheel, no agriculture. How then did they carve, transport, and erect megaliths with such precision? The mainstream view holds that Göbekli Tepe was a ritual site built by early foragers, that its construction itself sparked the shift toward agriculture and settlement. But others see it as evidence of memory, a project of remembrance, not invention. It is as if those people were rebuilding something they once knew, guided by stories of a world that had vanished. Its geometry hints at astronomy. The central pillars may represent celestial twins, a cosmic balance, or even a map of the stars as they appeared before the great cataclysm. In that same era, around the world, the earth was reshaping itself. The ice melted, seas surged, and coastlines redrew themselves overnight. Entire regions disappeared beneath rising tides. On the Sunda Shelf, the now drowned plains that once connected modern Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, sonar mapping reveals submerged river systems, hill chains, and what appear to be terraces and straight lines beneath hundreds of feet of water. To the west, the ruins off Yonaguni remain a silent question mark. Was it truly nature's hand that carved those right angles, or did a civilization once stand there, watching the flood come? Even on dry land, traces of impossible skill linger. In the highlands of Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, massive stones fit together so tightly that not even a razor blade can pass between them. Each block is unique, carved with multi-angled precision, locked in place as though melted into its neighbor. Engineers today admit they cannot replicate this work using only hand tools and ropes. The Inca themselves said they did not build it, that it was the work of the gods before them. The same is said of Puma Punku on the Bolivian Altiplano. There, giant H-shaped andesite blocks lie scattered like pieces of a dismantled machine. The cuts are flawless, the right angles exact to a fraction of a millimeter, as if shaped by diamond tools. And yet, mainstream archaeology dates it to around 500 CE, a time when the local Tiwanaku culture supposedly had no writing, no wheel, no metal saws. The question remains, were these ruins built atop older foundations, remnants of something erased long before the Tiwanaku people ever arrived? The pattern of inheritance, of civilizations rising atop forgotten ones, repeats endlessly. In Egypt, the pyramids of Giza stand as the ultimate enigma. The Great Pyramid, attributed to Pharaoh Khufu, is a line to true north with an accuracy of a few arc minutes, a precision achieved only with modern instruments. Its base is level within fractions of an inch. The internal shafts point to specific stars, Orion's belt, Sirius, marking the heavens as they appeared not in 2500 BCE, but in 10,500 BCE. To some researchers, this discrepancy is the key. The pyramid may have been designed to commemorate an earlier sky, a memory encoded in stone. Even older myths echo that celestial obsession. The ancient Egyptians believed their gods came from Zep Tepi, the first time, when the land was ruled by divine beings who descended from the stars and taught humans to build, to write, to measure the heavens. When that age ended, when the sky fell, chaos ruled, and order had to be restored by the pharaohs, who were seen as keepers of that lost divine wisdom. In other words, Egyptian civilization was not born from nothing. It was an act of remembering. This same theme, gods descending to teach, is found everywhere. In Sumer, the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth, brought agriculture and kingship. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, arrived after a flood, bringing the calendar, mathematics, and architecture. In the Andes, Viracocha emerged from Lake Titicaca to rebuild humanity after the destruction of a former world. The Polynesians tell of Tangaloa, the Sky Father, who descended to shape islands and raise men from stone. Were these beings literal visitors, or cultural metaphors for a vanished civilization so ancient that its survivors became mythologized as gods? The consistent motif is after the flood. Always there is a fall, a reset, a divine or cosmic catastrophe followed by the reteaching of humanity. Could these stories, then, describe the rebuilding efforts after the Younger Dryas event, an age when survivors of an advanced coastal culture spread across the globe, carrying fragments of memory and skill? The idea may sound radical, but genetic and linguistic evidence hints at a shared ancestry between distant peoples during this very period. In 2019, a study published in Nature revealed that genetic lineages in South America bear traces of an ancient migration from Southeast Asia, around 12,000 years ago, when sea levels were still low. Another study on mitochondrial DNA suggested that isolated groups in the Amazon carried genetic signatures linked to Australasia. How could this be, unless early transoceanic contact existed, long before ships, long before history? If we follow this thread, a picture emerges. Before the flood, global coastlines were hundreds of miles farther out. Great plains, river valleys, and island chains now submerged may once have supported connected human populations, trading, sharing myths, mapping the stars. When the seas rose, those networks were severed, leaving only fragments on the high ground. Fragments that became the first post-cataclysmic civilizations. Even mainstream geology confirms that the sea rose more than 120 meters between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. Imagine the scale of that transformation. Entire continents shrinking, millions of square miles erased. To the survivors, the world truly would have ended. No wonder every culture remembers it as divine punishment, as the day the gods withdrew. But there is a stranger possibility, one that some researchers, quietly, have begun to explore. What if the cataclysm wasn't entirely natural? Some theorists, studying isotope anomalies and ancient narratives, have suggested that something might have interacted with Earth's magnetic field. A solar outburst, or a cosmic energy event powerful enough to alter climate, melt ice, and erase entire memory systems. This hypothesis aligns eerily with depictions in ancient texts. The sun stood still, fire rained from the heavens, the day became night. The language of myth, yes, but also the language of trauma. It raises a haunting thought. Could the so-called gods of old, those beings said to have descended after the disaster, have been survivors of a technological civilization who endured underground or in distant refuges until the atmosphere stabilized? If such a culture once existed, its artifacts might lie beneath miles of sediment or at the bottom of the ocean, unreachable by current archaeology. The deeper we dig, the younger our finds become. The ocean floor, untouched for millennia, may hide the oldest story of all. And yet, there are signals. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas, a submerged formation of rectangular limestone blocks, aligns strangely with ancient shorelines and appears shaped by intelligent design. Off Cuba's western coast, sonar surveys in 2001 revealed a vast grid-like pattern at a depth of 600 meters, structures resembling pyramids, plazas, and roads. Scientists caution that it could be natural, but the geometry suggests otherwise. If it is man-made, it predates known civilization by many thousands of years. If so, then the line between myth and memory blurs entirely. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, names dismissed as legend, might simply be echoes of these lost coastal worlds. The Greeks themselves said that the story of Atlantis was already ancient when Solon heard it from Egyptian priests. They placed its fall 9,000 years before our time, precisely within the Younger Dryas. Coincidence, or an ancient record encoded in parable? No single site proves the existence of a lost civilization, but the accumulation of anomalies forms a whisper too persistent to ignore. Alignments too precise, myths too consistent, time frames too coincidental. Science demands proof, but history may only leave traces. Perhaps this is why we keep searching, not for certainty, but for continuity. Every megalith, every submerged ruin, every pattern in myth might be the faint outline of a forgotten map, one that points backward, toward an age when the boundary between gods and humans was not yet drawn. If such an age truly existed, its end would mark not just the fall of knowledge, but the birth of forgetting itself, the moment when memory turned into myth. And maybe, buried beneath ice, sand, and sea, that memory is still alive, waiting for us to remember how to read it. What if the gods were never divine, but human, and we are only their descendants, still wandering among their ruins, mistaking their echoes for thunder? The question remains open, suspended in the silence between what we know and what we have chosen to forget. The story of the lost age continues not just in stones or floods, but in the skies themselves. When ancient people looked upward, they did not see random stars scattered across darkness. They saw a story written in light. And that story, told in the geometry of temples and the alignments of sacred mountains, seems to remember a time before the world as we know it. Across the globe, there is evidence of an ancient obsession with the heavens, with precession, equinoxes, solstices, and cycles far too long for early civilizations to have measured by chance. These patterns suggest not only observation, but inheritance, knowledge passed down from a forgotten order that once charted the motion of the cosmos before the flood erased its cities. The precession of the equinoxes, a slow wobble of Earth's axis that completes one full cycle every 25,920 years, was not formally recognized until the Greek astronomer Hipparchus discovered it in the 2nd century BCE. Yet millennia earlier, temples in Egypt, stone rings in Britain, and pyramids in Mesoamerica were aligned to stars whose rising positions would have shifted only over many thousands of years. How could pre-literate builders have known that the sky itself moved unless they had inherited sky maps older than their own cultures? In the valley of the Nile, the Great Sphinx stares east towards the rising sun, its gaze fixed precisely where the constellation Leo would have appeared around 10,500 BCE. The same epoch marked by the end of the last ice age and the beginning of the mysterious Younger Dryas. The Sphinx's weathering, analyzed by geologists like Dr. Robert Schoch, shows signs of heavy rainfall erosion, not from wind and sand, but from sustained precipitation that last occurred in Egypt more than 10,000 years ago. If true, the Sphinx predates the pharaohs by thousands of years, a relic from the very dawn of civilization or from something before it. In South America, at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, massive doorways and walls align with solstices and equinoxes that no longer match the present-day sky. Their precise astronomical orientations seem to commemorate a celestial order that existed long before their supposed construction date. In Mexico, the layout of Teotihuacan mirrors the pattern of the Orion Belt stars, the same triad encoded at Giza, half a world away. The distances and angles match within striking precision, as if both were built according to a single cosmic blueprint, a shared remembrance of the heavens before the axis shifted, before memory fractured. The same geometric obsession appears in Angkor Wat, where the temples form a ground plan reflecting the constellation Draco as it would have appeared around 10,500 BCE. The builders of Angkor called it the City of the Gods, a reflection of heaven on earth. The same words echo in Hermopolis, in Heliopolis, in Chichen Itza. The same idea, that temples are mirrors of the sky, that to build is to remember. But what were they remembering? Why encode such precision into stone? To mark seasons and harvests, perhaps? But the scale of these alignments transcends practical need. A precessional cycle spans nearly 26,000 years, far beyond a single culture's lifespan. To observe it, one must either inherit long-term records or receive the knowledge directly from those who understood the mechanics of the heavens. The builders of Göbekli Tepe, the priests of Egypt, the astronomer shamans of the Andes, all seemed to possess fragments of the same lost astronomy. In the myths of nearly every ancient culture, the heavens were not only the home of gods, but the source of cosmic order. The Egyptians called it Ma'at, balance, harmony, the rhythm between above and below. When the sky fell, they said, Ma'at was broken, and chaos reigned until the order was restored. In Sumerian tradition, the tablets of destiny were said to control the courses of stars and the fate of kingdoms. In India, the Jyotisha texts describe precessional time cycles and world ages, yugas, spanning tens of thousands of years. In Mesoamerica, the Maya tracked Venus, eclipses, and the movement of the sun with mathematical precision, predicting celestial patterns across millennia. How could cultures separated by oceans and epochs have shared such astronomical obsession, unless they were all responding to a memory that began before history? Perhaps the most haunting evidence lies in the myths that link celestial catastrophe with human downfall. The Greeks told of Phaethon, who tried to steer his father's solar chariot and scorched the earth before being struck down. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire from the sky, followed by flood. The Norse describe Ragnarok, when the stars fall and the world tree burns. The Chinese tell of Gong Gong, the god who struck the celestial mountain and tilted the sky. These stories are not mere coincidence. They describe the same memory of something descending from the heavens, changing the climate, and resetting the clock of civilization. It is possible, some argue, that this obsession with the sky was not simply about worship, but about warning. To mark where the stars once stood, might have been to preserve the memory of when the catastrophe occurred, a celestial timestamp for a world-ending event. The ancients may have encoded their trauma in architecture, their grief in geometry. Stone, unlike words, endures. In the 1990s, the astronomer-engineer Robert Bovell proposed that the 3 pyramids of Giza were aligned to replicate the 3 stars of Orion's belt, as they appeared in 10,500 BCE. The idea, controversial but compelling, implied that Egypt's monuments were not random tombs, but components of a vast astronomical message, a memorial to the time when the gods of Orion descended to rebuild humanity. The Orion correlation has been debated for decades, yet it sparked a wave of re-examination across the globe. Why, Bovell asked, would ancient architects design monuments to mimic the sky of 10,000 years earlier, unless that was the moment they sought to remember? And perhaps the Sphinx, weathered by ancient rain, stands as the oldest witness, its leonine body symbolizing the age of Leo, its erosion marking the age when the heavens changed. If so, then the Giza Plateau is not just a necropolis, but a memory field, a reconstruction of the sky before the flood. To trace this pattern, we must travel further back, not in space, but in concept. Many esoteric traditions describe time as cyclical, not linear. The Hindu yugas, the Greek ages of man, the Hopi worlds, the Egyptian epochs all tell of recurring rises and collapses, golden ages and dark ones. The duration of these cycles often matches the precessional rhythm, roughly 26,000 years, as if humanity's fate were tied to the motion of the stars. What if these ages of the gods correspond to periods when Earth's orientation towards the galactic center changes, altering radiation, magnetism, and even consciousness? Modern astrophysics acknowledges that solar and cosmic energy influxes vary across these cycles. Could ancient myth have been an allegorical record of real cosmic transitions, epochs when the sky fell, not metaphorically, but physically? Even Plato hinted at such cosmic recurrence. In the Timaeus, he describes periodic destructions of humanity by fire and flood, caused by a declination of the bodies that move around the earth in the heavens. He claimed the Egyptians had preserved records of civilizations older than any known to Greece. Civilizations erased when the heavens moved in a new direction. These were not poetic inventions. They were fragments of inherited science. When we see ancient monuments pointing to the same constellations, encoding the same numbers, repeating the same geometry, we may not be witnessing coincidence. We may be witnessing a global effort to preserve cosmic memory, a map through time, warning future ages of what has come before. Perhaps that is why the ancients built in stone, not to reach the gods, but to remind themselves of them, or of themselves as gods once were. For if their world truly ended, if the sky truly fell, then to carve a star into rock was to anchor memory against oblivion. Every temple became an act of defiance, a declaration that forgetting would not win. And yet, across ages, forgetting always returns. Knowledge erodes, languages die, alignments drift. The monuments remain, but their meanings fade. The star maps we decipher today may be echoes of a language we no longer speak, one written in alignments, ratios, and light. So we are left with fragments, pyramids aligned to Orion, temples to Draco, cities to the equinox, a pattern repeating, incomplete but unmistakable. And through it all runs the same silent refrain. Something once happened to the sky, Perhaps this is why every mythology begins with descent. Gods falling, angels cast out, fires raining from heaven. Perhaps they are not moral allegories but historical memories, coded in story to survive illiterate generations. The fall of the sky, then, may not be myth at all, but remembrance of the last great cosmic shift, when the world tilted, the climate changed, and civilization was forced to begin again. If that is true, then every ancient observatory, from Stonehenge to Chichen Itza, is not only a window to the cosmos, but a clock ticking toward recurrence. A cycle forgotten by science but remembered by myth. A warning written in stone that the age of the gods ended once and could end again. The sky above us is not still. It drifts, wobbles, and turns. And perhaps somewhere deep in humanity's subconscious, that movement still whispers of loss, a loss so total that it became the first story ever told. When we look at the stars tonight, we may not just be seeing the future of light, but the shadow of memory, the reflection of a world erased. If the sky once fell, then what else might have fallen with it? Every legend of the gods ends not with ascension, but with disappearance, as though a curtain was drawn between the divine and the human, leaving behind only relics, rituals, and ruins. It is in those remnants that we glimpse something extraordinary, the sense that an older, greater order once existed, not only technologically, but spiritually. An order that understood the unity between earth and sky, matter and mind. An order whose loss left a wound so deep that every civilization since has tried, in its own way, to rebuild what was broken. In the oldest texts, from the Enuma Elish to the Book of Enoch, we find stories of beings who descended from the heavens to instruct humanity, not in faith, but in knowledge. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. They were not gods in the sense of omnipotence, but intermediaries, bearers of law, astronomy, agriculture, architecture, metallurgy. The Akkadian texts describe how they measured the foundations of heaven and earth, how they laid out the plans for cities, temples, and ziggurats. The Egyptian Thoth and the Greek Hermes carry the same archetype: teacher gods, recorders of wisdom, masters of measurement and writing. And then there is the myth of the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, heavenly beings who descended upon Mount Hermon and shared forbidden knowledge with humanity, the secrets of metal, of stars, of beauty, and of war. For this they were condemned, their memory erased. The echo of that story reverberates through almost every later tradition: the fall of Lucifer, the rebellion of the Titans, the punishment of Prometheus, the drowning of Atlantis. Always the same pattern: knowledge granted, misused, and punished by destruction. Could this mythic fall of the gods be the encoded memory of a civilizational collapse? A time when those who possessed advanced knowledge, survivors of a pre-cataclysmic world, were scattered among primitive peoples, deified by those they helped, then lost again to time? In Mesopotamia, the first city builders appear suddenly, as if summoned from nowhere. Around 4000 BCE, in the region of Eridu and Uruk, monumental architecture, cuneiform writing, irrigation systems, and complex governance appear almost overnight. Archaeologists have no evolutionary chain to explain it. The earliest tablets already contain the language of kingship, divine descent, and cosmic order. The Sumerians themselves claimed that civilization was lowered from heaven, that Eridu was the city of the gods, founded by Enki, the god of wisdom, water, and creation. Eridu's temple, known as the Iabzu, the house of the deep waters, was said to connect heaven, earth, and the subterranean realm. Its name appears on the oldest clay tablets ever found, including the Sumerian king list, which begins with rulers who reigned for tens of thousands of years before the flood. Mainstream scholars interpret these reigns as mythological exaggeration, but the precision of their succession, the cities, the order of kings, the mention of the flood as a dividing line, suggests a memory of real governance from a pre-deluge world. The same pattern emerges in Egypt. The Turin Papyrus and Palermo stone list divine and semi-divine rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the first pharaoh, describing them as beings who ruled when the gods were on earth. The Egyptian priest Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, confirmed these lists, dividing history into ages ruled by gods, demigods, and finally mortal kings. The overlap with Sumerian chronology is uncanny. Different lands, different languages, yet the same memory. Divine rulers before the flood, an erasure, then the rebirth of civilization. To dismiss these records as fantasy is to ignore how consistent they are, not in the miracles they describe, but in the structure of their remembering. The same flood, the same descent, the same loss. It is as though humanity everywhere was trying to reconstruct the same forgotten epic, using fragments of memory and symbol. But if this was remembrance, not invention, what was truly lost? Some clues lie in the technology implied by the ruins. The granite boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara, cut from single pieces of stone weighing over 70 tons, polished to optical smoothness. The drill holes at Abu Rawash, showing spiral patterns consistent with high-speed rotary tools. The precision of Machu Picchu's terraces, shaped to the curvature of the mountain for seismic stability. The vitrified fortresses of Scotland, their stones melted together by extreme heat. These are not isolated anomalies. They are the fingerprints of a vanished science, a mastery of material and vibration that modern engineers barely comprehend. The ancients themselves claimed their knowledge came from sound, from resonance, the music of the spheres. In Egypt, the priests of Heka spoke of shaping matter with vibration. In India, the Samaveda describes the universe as born from tone. Plato's Timaeus speaks of the world soul constructed from harmonic ratios. Could these myths be poetic expressions of an actual technology? A lost understanding of sound and frequency that allowed ancient builders to move and mold stone as if it were weightless? If so, then the temples and pyramids were not merely tombs or shrines, they were instruments. Acoustic studies of the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid reveal resonant frequencies precisely tuned to the dimensions of the room. Chanting or sound could amplify energy within it. The same is true at Newgrange, Malta's Hypogeum, and Chavin de Huantar in Peru, where resonating tunnels and chambers create harmonic interference patterns. These are the signatures of builders who understood vibration not as metaphor, but as force. In this sense, the age of the gods may not have been an age of supernatural beings, but of natural mastery, a civilization that reached a deep union between science and spirit, between technology and consciousness. Its fall, then, would not merely be a physical catastrophe, but a rupture of worldview, the separation of sacred and material knowledge. After that, humanity remembered fragments, geometry without meaning, ritual without understanding. And perhaps this is why myth insists that the gods withdrew. Their withdrawal may symbolize the withdrawal of wisdom itself, knowledge hidden, buried, forgotten. The Anunnaki did not ascend to the heavens. They became the heavens, remembered only in the stars that once guided navigation and story. Even in later ages, hints of this lost synthesis reappear. In the Greek mystery schools, the Hermetic texts, the Gnostic fragments, the legends of Thoth's emerald tablets. These writings describe a knowledge of the one thing, an understanding that all forces are connected, that spirit and matter are reflections of a single source. The Emerald Tablet's most famous line, "As above, so below," is not philosophy. It is instruction. It encodes a world view born from the ancient unity of earth and sky. When the Age of the Gods ended, that unity fractured. The survivors, whether literal or symbolic, carried fragments of it across the world. Some founded priesthoods, others built temples to preserve geometry. Over time, their teachings crystallized into religion, their science into myth. The deeper meaning faded, replaced by worship and repetition. But within those myths, the old memory still glimmers. The serpent coiled around the tree, the axis mundi connecting heaven and earth, the sacred mountain at the world's center, all point back to the same original cosmology. The gods were not external deities, but reflections of the forces that sustain creation. They were knowledge personified. If this is true, then the great cataclysm, the fall of the sky, was not just the loss of cities, but the loss of connection. Humanity forgot that it was part of the cosmos, not separate from it. We began to build in isolation, to measure without meaning. The stars became objects of study, not kin. The temples became stones, not songs. And yet, across all epochs, a few remembered. The Hermeticists of Alexandria, the astronomer priests of Chichen Itza, the monks who preserved geometry through the Dark Ages, all carried fragments of the same flame. That is why the symbols repeat: the winged disk, the all-seeing eye, the trinity of heaven, earth, and underworld. They are echoes of an ancient pattern, the one the gods left behind when they fell. Perhaps that fall was not punishment, but necessity. Perhaps knowledge, like fire, must sometimes die to be reborn safely. A civilization that understood resonance, energy, and thought as one may have wielded power beyond comprehension. Its end may have been both tragedy and reset, a cosmic safeguard against imbalance. If so, then we are its heirs, the children of a civilization erased not by gods, but by its own awakening. The question that lingers, whispered through temple corridors and encoded in myth, is whether the cycle will repeat. Every time humanity approaches that same threshold, every time we merge technology and consciousness, the memory of that lost age stirs. The dream of flight, the hunger for creation, the fear of collapse. The same story, reenacted across time. Maybe that is the true meaning of the Age of the Gods. Not a golden past, but an eternal pattern. Rise, mastery, hubris, fall, remembrance, and rebirth. A cosmic rhythm playing out across eons, reflected in every myth of light descending into darkness. The sky fell once. It may fall again. But perhaps this time we will remember why. Every civilization carries within its myths a memory of destruction, a shadow written into its genesis. The flood of Sumer, the fire of Greece, the ice of the north, all tell the same story. The gods withdrew, the world began again, and humanity was left to wander among the ruins of its own amnesia. Yet between the ashes of myth and the fragments of archaeology lies something else, a pattern of reconstruction, as if the survivors of that great fall had tried to rebuild what they could remember, piece by piece, across continents and ages. When the waters receded and the skies cleared, the survivors of the cataclysm, whether literal or symbolic, would have faced a world unrecognizable. Coastlines shifted, seasons warped, animals vanished. Those who lived near the equator may have fled northward in search of temperate land. Those from the highlands descended into fertile valleys. In this scattering, new cultures were born, and within them, faint memories of the old order. Archaeology shows something strange around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE, the sudden rise of agriculture, monumental construction, and organized religion, as if humanity awoke from a long sleep with fragments of knowledge too advanced for its context. At Göbekli Tepe, that awakening took the form of megalithic architecture. In the Fertile Crescent, it birthed irrigation and the cultivation of wheat. In the Nile Valley, it became the geometry of sacred measure. In the Andes, it evolved into terraced mountains and astronomical temples. These were not isolated sparks. They were echoes, the same seed germinating in different soils. Consider the earliest city ever recorded, Eridu in southern Mesopotamia. The Sumerians said it was founded by the god Enki after the flood, when the divine kingship descended from heaven. The first kings, according to the Sumerian king list, ruled for thousands of years, impossibly long by human standards. Scholars call it exaggeration, yet the list divides history neatly into two epochs, before the flood and after the flood. That division mirrors the structure of myths worldwide, suggesting a collective psychological break, the boundary between memory and history. In Egypt, the same pattern repeats. The so-called followers of Horus, semi-divine rulers who reigned before the first dynasties, were said to have restored order after chaos. Their knowledge was preserved in temples through ritual geometry and sound. Even the word pharaoh stems from per-ae, great house, a term that may once referred not to a person, but to an institution preserving ancient knowledge. The earliest Egyptian hieroglyphs appear fully formed, as if inherited rather than invented. The same sudden sophistication appears in Sumerian cuneiform, Mayan glyphs, and the Indus script. No slow evolution, only emergence, like a memory resurfacing. This is the mystery that continues to haunt researchers. Why did civilization seem to appear simultaneously in multiple regions, separated by oceans? The orthodox timeline cannot fully explain it. Independent development is possible, but the precision of astronomical alignments, the uniformity of mythic structure, and the recurrence of identical sacred numbers, 72, 108, 360, 432, suggest something deeper, a shared inheritance. Those numbers, found in Hindu cosmology, in the Great Pyramid's proportions, and in the Norse Edda, are not random. They correspond to the mechanics of precession, the geometry of celestial motion. Whoever first encoded them understood not just the earth, but its movement through space and time. If the post-cataclysmic builders were preserving fragments of pre-cataclysmic knowledge, then their monuments are not beginnings, but memorials. Some researchers propose that an ancient order, call it priesthood, call it brotherhood, may have survived the destruction and carried fragments of knowledge into the new world. Legends across cultures speak of such figures: the seven sages of Sumer, the Shemsu Hor of Egypt, the Viracochas of the Andes, the Nagas of India. They always appear after disaster, teaching agriculture, architecture, and navigation. They come from the sea, often described as tall, bearded, radiant, cloaked in light or scales, imagery consistent from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. In the Andes, the god Viracocha emerged from Lake Titicaca after the flood, bringing knowledge and peace. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, did the same. In Polynesia, Tangaloa descended from the sky to rebuild the islands. Are these the same being remembered through different languages, or descendants of a real culture whose sailors reached the scattered remnants of the post-flood world? The world's oldest navigational myths hint that the ocean itself was once a highway. Ancient maps, the Piri Reis map, the Orontius Phineus map, show Antarctica free of ice, drawn with longitudes that would require a global knowledge of spherical geometry. Mainstream scholars attribute them to copying older, unknown sources. If those sources existed, they must have originated in a seafaring civilization predating recorded history. Could the fabled islands of the gods, the vanished lands of Atlantis and Mu, have been remnants of this maritime world, their knowledge scattered to Egypt, Sumer, and the Andes after their submersion? Plato's Timaeus and Critias describe Atlantis as an island beyond the pillars of Heracles that fell in a single day and night of misfortune. The date he gives, 9,000 years before Solon, places it near 9600 BCE, the same window as the younger Dryas cataclysm. For centuries, the story was dismissed as allegory, yet geological evidence now confirms massive flooding and sea level rise at exactly that time. The Timaeus also describes the Atlanteans as astronomers, engineers, and sailors, masters of measure who lost their virtue and were punished by the gods. The parallels to Sumerian and Egyptian myths are unmistakable. If we strip away the allegory, we are left with a simple pattern. A civilization advanced for its age, destroyed by sudden global catastrophe, remembered by its survivors as divine. Its legacy carried in fragmentary form to the next cycle. Atlantis may not have been one island, but many, a global maritime network erased by flood, its ports now lying beneath hundreds of meters of water. Modern technology is beginning to catch glimpses of this lost shoreline. Sonar mapping has revealed submerged structures off India, Japan, the Bahamas, and the Mediterranean. In the Gulf of Cambay, divers discovered artifacts carbon-dated to 9,500 years ago, long before the rise of known cities. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar images show symmetrical formations at a depth of 600 meters, possibly the remnants of ancient architecture. Each new discovery erodes the boundary between myth and memory. If the survivors of the Great Flood scattered across the world, they would have rebuilt what they knew: temples aligned to the stars, rituals echoing the sky, myths encoding time. The sacred triads, heaven, earth, and underworld, sky, land, and sea, are linguistic fossils of that world order. Even language itself may carry traces of the forgotten. Comparative linguistics shows surprising similarities between distant tongues: Sumerian and Quechua, Tamil and Mayan, Basque and Berber, as if fragments of an older root language had survived in isolation. Perhaps that root tongue is what ancient mystics called the language of the gods, the lost original speech of humanity. In many traditions, the fall of Babel represents not the beginning of language, but the fragmentation of memory. The tower that reached the heavens may symbolize a civilization that once unified heaven and earth through knowledge, its collapse marking the division of humanity into separate, disconnected cultures. In this view, the gods did not destroy the tower. Memory did. After the catastrophe, each remnant rebuilt from its own fragment. Some preserved geometry, others myth, others agriculture. Over millennia, those fragments became distinct civilizations. Yet beneath the surface, they pulse with the same rhythm, the same sacred ratios, the same obsession with alignment, the same story of the flood. What we call the birth of civilization may, in truth, be the recollection of one. Humanity did not begin in ignorance and rise toward knowledge. It began in remembrance and is still relearning what it once knew. This inversion challenges everything we think we know about progress. It suggests that history is not a straight line, but a spiral, rising and falling through cycles of creation and amnesia. The age of the gods was one turn of that spiral, the current age another. Between them lies the silence of forgetting, the long night of loss. If that pattern is real, then it may not be unique to Earth. Cosmic cycles of destruction and renewal exist everywhere, in stars, in galaxies, in the pulse of the universe itself. Perhaps consciousness too follows that rhythm, awakening, flowering, collapsing, then awakening again, carrying traces of each former self. The ancients may have known this. Their myths of world ages, the Hindu yugas, the Greek ages of man, the Mayan suns, are not random. They are time signatures, describing a cosmic heartbeat. The flood marks not only an end, but a transition, the moment when one great cycle of humanity gave way to the next. And so, scattered across the world, the survivors of that transition encoded their message in everything they built: pyramids that mirror the stars, temples that sing with resonance, myths that begin with the same warning. It happened once before. The more we uncover, the more that warning begins to sound like prophecy. For if the sky fell once, it can fall again. And when it does, we may once more stand on the shores of a world remade, clutching fragments of what we used to be, trying to remember how to rebuild. Perhaps the gods were not gods at all, but the last humans of the last world, remembering what the new world had already forgotten. What if memory itself is a form of archaeology, an excavation of consciousness across time? As we move deeper into the strata of myth and evidence, the boundary between the material and the metaphysical begins to blur. The lost age of the gods may not only have been a civilization of stone and metal, but also of mind. A culture whose science was inseparable from spirit, whose technology was a manifestation of consciousness itself. Perhaps the greatest loss of all was not their architecture, but their awareness. Ancient traditions consistently describe knowledge as something remembered, not learned. In the Vedic texts, the rishis, the seers, heard the hymns of creation. They did not invent them. In Greece, the word anamnesis means recollection of divine truth. Plato's dialogues suggest that the soul already knows everything and simply remembers through contemplation. In Egypt, Thoth's wisdom was said to awaken what already exists within the human heart. These ideas point to an older worldview, one in which consciousness is the true source of knowledge, and the physical world is only its reflection. If that worldview once defined the lost civilization, its collapse would have represented not only a physical cataclysm, but a cognitive one. Humanity would have shifted from intuitive knowing to external reasoning, from participation in the cosmos to observation of it. Myth calls this the fall of the gods. Psychology might call it the separation of self and world, the birth of the modern mind. Clues to this forgotten consciousness still exist, encrypted in sacred geometry and number. The Great Pyramid's dimensions encode pi and the golden ratio. The temples of Angkor and Borobudur reflect the fractal structure of the cosmos, the same pattern seen in galaxies and shells. The I Ching's 64 hexagrams correspond to the codons of DNA. The Mayan calendar mirrors solar and galactic cycles. These correspondences are not coincidence. They suggest that ancient builders perceived pattern as sacred, not because it was religious, but because it revealed the unity of mind and matter. For them, mathematics was not abstraction. It was music. The Greek musica universalis, the harmony of the spheres, described the same principle known to Sumerians as Mi, to Indians as RTA, to Egyptians as Ma'at, that everything in the universe vibrates in relationship, that balance sustains creation. When the sky fell, that harmony was broken. The surviving civilization spent millennia trying to restore it through ritual, architecture, and story. Even their gods represent this process of remembering. The Sumerian Enki, the Egyptian Thoth, the Greek Hermes, the Hindu Vishvakarman. All are patrons of reconstruction. They do not destroy. They repair. They are the memory of order after chaos. When myth says that these gods descended, it may mean that fragments of this consciousness reawakened in scattered places, like neurons refiring after a long sleep. Modern researchers exploring the intersection of consciousness and physics are perhaps unknowingly circling back to that same insight. Quantum theory suggests that the observer participates in the reality observed, that consciousness influences matter at the subatomic level. In other words, mind and world are intertwined. This idea, new to modern science, was ancient to the priests of Heliopolis, or the sages of the Rig Veda. They spoke of a time when thought itself could shape the physical, when intention, resonance, and geometry were the tools of creation. Such concepts may sound mystical, but physical evidence hints that ancient builders engineered their monuments not only to align with the heavens, but to amplify energy. The limestone casing of the Great Pyramid, the granite of its chambers, the quartz content of its core, all materials capable of conducting piezoelectric charge. The layout of the Giza Plateau mirrors an electrical circuit, with pyramids functioning as nodes. Recent acoustic studies show that the king's chamber resonates at specific frequencies, frequencies that correspond to brainwave states of deep meditation. It is as if the structure was designed to induce altered consciousness, connecting the individual with the cosmos. Similar effects have been found in Newgrange, Malta's Hypogeum, and Chavin de Huantar in Peru. Temples whose corridors produce resonant frequencies around 110 Hz, capable of synchronizing neural patterns. These are not coincidences of architecture. They are remnants of a lost psychoacoustic science, one that understood sound as the bridge between mind and matter. Imagine such a civilization, not mechanical, but harmonic. Its buildings would be instruments, its rituals tuning sessions, its priests both engineers and philosophers. When catastrophe struck, their technology would vanish with their world view. Without understanding resonance, future generations would see only stones. This may explain the paradox of ancient ruins. Their construction defies our engineering, yet their purpose defies our comprehension. We can measure their dimensions, but not their meaning. We see them as static, but they were dynamic, alive with vibration, light, and energy. The fragmentation of this unified science might also explain the sudden diversification of myth after the flood. Each surviving culture remembered only a piece of the whole. In Egypt, the focus became the afterlife, a journey through vibration and transformation. In India, it became reincarnation, the cyclic rhythm of consciousness. In Greece, it became philosophy, the search for universal form through reason. In Sumer, it became law and measurement, the geometry of society. Each tradition preserved one organ of a larger body now lost. Over time, those fragments crystallized into religion, outer ritual replacing inner resonance. Temples became houses of worship instead of harmonic chambers. Myths became dogma. The memory of unity faded. Humanity began to look upward for gods that once looked outward from within. And yet, the deeper one studies the earliest layers of those religions, the more they converge. The Egyptian Atum, the Vedic Brahman, the Hebrew Ein Sof, the Greek Nous, all describe a singular consciousness that manifests as multiplicity. Creation, in their view, was not a fabrication from nothing, but a forgetting, the one dividing into the many. The fall was the moment when the many forgot they were one. If the lost age of the gods represented a time when this truth was lived rather than theorized, its destruction might have been both an end and a necessity. For consciousness to evolve, perhaps it had to forget, to lose itself in matter, to rediscover itself through time. In that sense, the fall of the sky was not punishment, but initiation. Every age since then has been a step in that remembering. The reawakening of science, the rediscovery of geometry, the exploration of space. These are not new pursuits, but ancient ones resumed. Humanity is slowly rebuilding what it once knew, that the universe is alive, that energy and consciousness are one. Even modern cosmology, with its talk of vibration, frequency, and resonance, echoes the old doctrines. String theory describes matter as oscillations of energy, the same idea the ancients encoded in sound and number. Astrophysicists describe the universe as a hologram, where each part contains the whole, precisely what the Hermetic texts taught. That which is below is like that which is above. We are, perhaps unknowingly, returning to the world view of the lost age. But this time, the remembering is conscious. Across the world, ancient sites seem to activate something in those who visit them, a subtle recognition, an echo in the nervous system. Standing within the great chambers of Giza, or beneath the corbelled vault of Newgrange at winter solstice, one feels the hum of resonance as if the stones themselves are alive. It is not imagination. It is memory, not of this life, but of humanity's collective inheritance. That inheritance may be genetic as well as cultural. Studies in epigenetics suggest that trauma and experience can imprint themselves in DNA, passed from generation to generation. If so, then the memory of the cataclysm, of the fall of the gods, may be written within us, a cellular echo of survival. Our myths are our biology dreaming. Perhaps this is why stories of the lost golden age stir something primal, not curiosity but longing, a sense that we have been here before, that we have known unity and lost it. That longing may be the compass of evolution itself, consciousness trying to find its way home. The ancients seemed to understand this. Their myths were not warnings of apocalypse, but instructions for renewal. The flood was both destruction and cleansing. The fall of the sky was the death of illusion. The gods did not vanish. They transformed into potential, waiting within us to be remembered. The old temples, now silent, were built not to summon gods, but to awaken humans. To stand within them was to remember one's place in the symphony, a note in the cosmic chord. Their builders knew that true divinity is not in the heavens, but in harmony. And perhaps that is the meaning of when the sky fell and memory was erased. The sky did not collapse, it descended into us. The divine moved inward, scattering itself among billions of minds. We are the continuation of the lost age, its echo made flesh. If we are to recover that ancient knowledge, we must do what the ancients did. Look not only outward, but inward. For the temples of stone may crumble, but the temple of memory endures, buried not under sand or sea, but beneath the surface of awareness. What fell was not the sky, but the veil. What was lost was not the gods, but our ability to see ourselves as them. And so the age of forgetting continues until we learn again to hear the music beneath the noise, the song that began before the flood, that still hums within the silence between stars. Perhaps the gods did not die at all. Perhaps they are simply waiting for us to remember the sound of their voice, which has always been our own. Every myth of creation hides within it a story of destruction. Every story of divine ascent conceals a fall. By the time the first empires rose along the Tigris, the Nile, and the Indus, humanity had already inherited a broken mirror, fragments of a once whole knowledge reflecting only pieces of its former brilliance. What we call ancient history may, in truth, be the middle of a far older tale, one written in cycles of remembrance and amnesia. As cities flourished and languages multiplied, the myths of the lost age became the foundation of religion. The gods who once walked among men were transformed into celestial abstractions. Ritual replaced resonance. Law replaced harmony. The temples that once served as instruments of alignment became symbols of authority, and beneath all of it lingered a haunting refrain: the world is not what it was. The Sumerians remembered this as the covenant of Enki, the god who once dwelled among the waters but retreated when humanity grew loud. The Egyptians expressed it through the legend of Isis and Osiris, the dismembered god reassembled piece by piece, symbolizing the reconstruction of divine order. In Greece, it became the myth of Kronos devouring his children, time itself consuming its own creations. Each myth encoded the same ache, the sense that a golden age had been shattered and that the world we inhabit is its broken reflection. By the second millennium BCE, the priesthoods of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica had become archivists of that memory. They preserved fragments of astronomical cycles, sacred numbers, and cosmic geometry within layers of ritual and theology. In the temples of Karnak and Luxor, hieroglyphs recorded the passage of stars, the rising of Sirius, the turning of ages. In Babylon, the Mola-Pian tablets mapped constellations with mathematical accuracy. The Mayan priests of Palenque and Copan tracked Venus with precision that modern astronomers only rediscovered millennia later. These were not primitive superstitions. They were coded recollections, the last flickers of a cosmic science expressed through religious form. The great irony is that as humanity grew more civilized, it drifted further from the memory it was trying to preserve. The age of the gods had ended not because knowledge disappeared, but because consciousness changed. A wall was built between the visible and the invisible. The language of symbol, once direct and experiential, became literal and dogmatic. The living connection between humanity and the cosmos became an article of faith instead of perception. And yet, in every civilization, there remained a few who remembered: the initiates, the mystics, the astronomer priests, the keepers of hidden schools. They carried fragments of the old science through secrecy and symbol. The Hermetic texts of late Egypt claimed to preserve the teachings of Thoth, the god of wisdom. Egypt is the image of heaven, they declared, and the whole cosmos dwells within her. The same concept appeared in India's Upanishads. As is the macrocosm, so is the microcosm. These were not metaphors. They were survival codes designed to transmit the lost worldview across millennia. When Alexander's armies reached Egypt and Greece absorbed its wisdom, the old knowledge fragmented again, this time into philosophy and alchemy. The Greeks renamed Thoth as Hermes Trismegistus, and his teachings became the foundation of Hermeticism, the doctrine that all is one, that mind and matter are reflections of each other, and that the universe is a living being. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Hermes, condensed the essence of the old science into a single line. That which is above is like that which is below. It was the echo of the same cosmic truth that built the pyramids, that aligned temples with stars, that understood the harmony between heaven and earth. Meanwhile, in the East, other inheritors of that lost wisdom preserved it under different names. In the Vedas, the sacred syllable Om, the vibration of creation, was said to contain all sound, all matter, all time. The Buddhist mandala recreated the structure of the universe in geometric form, mirroring the same principles once carved into stone in Egypt and Sumer. In China, the Tao Te Ching described the Tao as the unnameable source of all things, an ancient memory of the one from which the many emerged. The threads of the old knowledge spread, mutated, survived. Even the Abrahamic faiths, which outwardly rejected polytheism, retained the language of divine descent: the Nephilim, the Watchers, the Fallen Ones. The Book of Enoch spoke of angels who left their station in heaven to teach humanity forbidden arts. Those stories, reinterpreted as moral allegory, may once have been historical recollections of the same pre-flood teachers, the remnants of the age of the gods who had fallen to earth. As centuries passed, the memories blurred into myth, and myth hardened into dogma. The gods became distant, the heavens silent. The scientific mind that would one day rediscover the mechanics of the stars did so only after forgetting their meaning. Yet even as reason rose, a strange nostalgia remained, an unspoken yearning for the sacred pattern that once united everything. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, even modern physics are not departures from myth, but its unconscious continuation. In Florence, scholars rediscovered the Hermetic texts and believed they had found the key to divine wisdom. Copernicus and Kepler, both trained in theology, described the heavens not merely as mechanical systems, but as expressions of cosmic harmony. Kepler wrote that geometry existed before the creation of the world, echoing the same truth once carved into the Great Pyramid's limestone. Newton, whose Principia laid the foundations of modern physics, spent more time studying alchemy and scripture than motion and gravity. He believed that the Temple of Solomon encoded the proportions of the cosmos, a faint echo of the ancient conviction that sacred architecture was a reflection of universal order. In that sense, the modern world is not free of the old myth. It is its latest iteration. Our machines orbit the stars our ancestors worshipped. Our telescopes trace the same alignments once mapped by priests and shamans. The language has changed, but the longing has not. Science, like myth, seeks coherence, the secret architecture of reality. And perhaps that is the true continuity between the lost age and ours. Beneath all progress lies a desire to return, to rediscover what was lost when the sky fell. Every technological leap is an unconscious reconstruction of ancient knowledge. The satellite network encircling Earth is a new constellation. The Internet, connecting billions of minds, is a new etheric field. Artificial intelligence, learning and adapting, is a new echo of the living gods, consciousness externalized once again. But with each return to power, the same danger reappears. The myths warn of it. Knowledge without wisdom leads to imbalance. The Atlanteans, the Titans, the Watchers, all fell because they misused what they knew. The cataclysm that ended the age of the gods may not have been punishment, but consequence. When resonance turns to domination, when harmony becomes control, the system resets. That pattern, rise, mastery, fall, may be built into the fabric of cosmic law itself. If this is true, then humanity stands again at the threshold of memory. We have split the atom, mapped the genome, and reached the stars. We have recreated, in digital form, the collective consciousness once shared through temple and myth. Yet what we lack is balance, the mayat that held heaven and earth together. The same imbalance that toppled the first age begins to hum beneath our own. The ancients tried to warn us. Their myths were not primitive explanations but encoded instructions. The flood, the fall, the fire. These were not events to fear, but cycles to understand. Destruction is renewal misread. The fall of the sky was the descent of the divine into matter, and every age since has been a climb back toward remembrance. To read the old stories properly is to see ourselves in them. We are the children of the gods who forgot what they were. Our empires, our technologies, our religions, all are attempts to reconstruct the lost harmony. The question is whether we can do so without repeating the fall. Across the deserts of Egypt, the Altiplano of Bolivia, the jungles of Guatemala, and the drowned plains of the Sonda Shelf, the same silence endures. It is not the silence of emptiness, but of waiting. The stones remember, even if we do not. They hold the vibration of an age when thought and creation were one. Perhaps that silence is an invitation to listen, to remember that the gods we seek were never elsewhere, but within the architecture of consciousness itself. The temples of stone are only mirrors for the temple of mind. The flood did not wash away the divine. It buried it in us. When the last of the priest kings looked to the sky and saw it fall, they must have known what would happen next. That time would fold, that memory would fade, that a new humanity would rise and forget. Yet perhaps they also knew this, that forgetting is never final. The spiral of ages always turns back. The gods return not from the heavens, but from within the hearts of those who remember. Maybe that is what the ancients meant by prophecy, not foretelling the future, but remembering the pattern. The fall of the sky, the flood, the rebuilding, it all happens again and again until consciousness becomes aware of itself through the cycle. The story of the Lost Age is not a myth about the past. It is a mirror for the present. And as we stand beneath the same stars our ancestors carved into stone, we might finally understand what they were trying to tell us. The gods never left. They simply became human. And the sky, it was never destroyed. It only fell far enough for us to live beneath it. There is a point in every cycle where memory begins to awaken again, where myth trembles on the edge of history, and history begins to sound like myth. The ruins of the old world, once buried under millennia of dust, begin to reappear in the modern imagination. Temples mapped by satellite, megaliths rediscovered by drone, star alignments recalculated by new algorithms. It is as if the earth itself is whispering to be remembered. And in that whisper, something ancient stirs. The 20th century was an age of rediscovery and of denial. As explorers, archaeologists, and scientists unearthed new mysteries, they often found themselves standing between two worlds, the rational and the mythic. In 1945, when the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered in Egypt, they revealed Gnostic visions of the cosmos older than Christianity, texts that spoke of the universe as a living thought. A few years later, at Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced, echoing similar themes of cyclical destruction and renewal. And in Turkey, beneath a dusty hill called Göbekli Tepe, an entire world rewrote history itself, a temple older than civilization, a memory buried and then deliberately hidden. Each discovery seemed to peel back another layer of forgetting. The more humanity uncovered, the older its story became, and the more that story began to mirror the myths of the gods. The archaeologists spoke in the language of carbon dating and stratigraphy, but beneath their findings lay a deeper rhythm, a sense that time does not progress in a straight line, but in spirals. We do not move away from the past, we orbit it. In 1968, the author Erich von Däniken published Chariots of the Gods and popularized a radical question. What if humanity's greatest monuments were not born of primitive superstition, but of contact, a transfer of knowledge from beings older or wiser than ourselves? While mainstream scholars dismissed his theories, the question itself endured. Why do ancient structures around the world, pyramids, ziggurats, terraced temples, share such uncanny geometry? Why are the same star clusters, the same gods, and the same flood stories found in cultures separated by oceans and millennia? Coincidence seems too fragile an answer. By the late 20th century, a new generation of researchers began to follow the anomalies, not to prove myths literally true, but to understand why those myths exist at all. Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson, and others pointed to geological evidence of a cataclysmic event around 12,800 years ago, the very threshold between the Ice Age and recorded history. They found black layers of soot and platinum-rich dust scattered across continents, glass melted by unimaginable heat, and craters hidden beneath the ice of Greenland. To science, this became the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. To myth, it was the day the sky fell. Yet even as the data accumulated, academia hesitated. The idea of a global catastrophe that wiped away a forgotten civilization threatened too many assumptions about progress, about origins, about ourselves. The modern world, so proud of its rationality, feared the implications of memory. If humanity had once been older, wiser, more attuned to the cosmos, then what was modernity but a kind of amnesia disguised as advancement? Still, the pattern refused to disappear. Satellite imagery began to reveal underwater ruins, symmetrical formations, and lost cities beneath layers of silt and coral. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas, dismissed for decades as a natural formation, aligned too perfectly with ancient shorelines to ignore. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument displayed terraces and stairways chiseled with geometric precision. In the Gulf of Cambay, sonar scans revealed stone walls and plazas dating back nearly 9,500 years, an age when, by textbook accounts, humans were still nomads. Each discovery whispered the same heresy. Civilization is older than we think. But the true revolution was not technological. It was psychological. As humanity began to see itself from space, a blue sphere suspended in black, the old myth returned in modern form. We once imagined gods descending from the sky. Now we send our own creations there. Satellites orbit in patterns reminiscent of the sacred geometries once carved into ziggurats. Our cities glow at night like constellations reborn on Earth. The divine architecture has returned, but in reverse. Where once heaven descended, now Earth ascends. In this reversal, myth comes full circle. The gods who fell from the sky were not extraterrestrial deities, but symbols of knowledge, consciousness descending into matter, into limitation. Humanity, in reaching outward again, is the cosmos remembering itself. The rocket and the pyramid, the telescope and the temple, they are built from the same instinct, the hunger to return to the stars, to rejoin the pattern that once fell apart. Yet as we rediscover our cosmic origins, we face the same peril that ended the first age. The old stories warn of imbalance, of power without harmony. Atlantis fell not because it was evil, but because it forgot its own principles. The Mahabharata speaks of weapons that could destroy the world, thunderbolts and burning arrows that mirror our own nuclear age. Even now, the line between creation and destruction grows thinner. For the first time in recorded history, humanity possesses the power to end its own cycle. The gods once lost control of the heavens. We now control the earth. The myth repeats, but this time the actors have changed. If we are to survive, we must understand what the ancients knew, that knowledge without wisdom is blindness, and power without reverence is collapse. The age of the gods was not destroyed by ignorance, but by pride, by forgetting that creation and destruction are the same breath of the cosmos. Every temple, every flood myth, every sacred number is a warning written in the language of eternity. Remember who you are. But what does that mean? To remember. Perhaps it begins not in discovery, but in humility. The ancients did not see themselves as rulers of nature, but as participants within it. Their monuments aligned with solstices not because of superstition, but because they sought to live within the rhythm of the cosmos. To them, time was music, and humanity was a note within it. When the harmony was lost, the song collapsed into noise. Today, the noise is everywhere, digital, electric, relentless. We have mapped the heavens but forgotten silence. We have decoded the atom but lost the mystery of being. The temples of the past lie in ruins, but the new temples, of glass, steel, and data, hum with the same longing, to connect the finite with the infinite, the human with the divine. There are moments when the veil thins, when the pulse of the old world can still be felt. It happens in the deep desert, under a sky unpolluted by light, where the Milky Way unfurls like a river of memory. It happens in the Andes, where Machu Picchu catches dawn exactly as the sun aligns with the sacred peaks. It happens when one stands inside the king's chamber and feels the resonance vibrate in the bones. These are not coincidences. They are callings. The earth remembers through us. And what if the myths were not just memories of a lost past, but premonitions of recurrence? Every cataclysm that has ended an age, whether by flood, fire, or forgetting, was also a rebirth. The destruction that ended the world of the gods may have been the necessary clearing for human consciousness to emerge. The destruction that ends our age may yet birth another, if we can transform fear into understanding. To do so, we must relearn what the ancients practiced effortlessly, the art of seeing pattern. They saw the world not as chaos, but as correspondence between sky and stone, between heartbeat and tide, between thought and star. Science now calls this complexity. Physics calls it resonance. Mystics call it unity. Different words for the same truth. Everything is connected. If the age of the gods once ended because that truth was forgotten, then our survival depends on remembering it. The fall of the sky was not the end of divinity. It was its transformation. The gods became the laws of nature, the frequencies of energy, the patterns of creation itself. When we study them through science, we are not disproving myth, we are rediscovering it. And so the spiral continues. The ruins call us back, not to worship the past, but to complete its circle. We are the inheritors of both the builders and the destroyers, the creators and the fallen. The sky fell once, and from its fragments came us. Now, as we stand on the threshold of another great transition, ecological, technological, spiritual, we hold in our hands the same choice that the gods once faced, to ascend through harmony, or to fall again through hubris. Perhaps that is why the old myths never die. They are not history lessons, but mirrors, reflections of what we have always been. The gods were never separate. They were metaphors for our potential, our capacity to shape, to destroy, to remember. When the sky fell, they did not vanish. They became the dust that makes our bones, the stardust that forms our blood, the consciousness that dreams itself human. To remember the lost age is to remember that divinity is not above us, but within us. Every generation, every civilization rediscovers this truth in its own language. Some carve it into stone, others encode it in mathematics or launch it into the stars. The form changes, but the longing does not. The universe keeps trying to remember itself through us. And maybe, just maybe, that is the real meaning of the story. The sky fell once, but it did not die. It became the horizon of our becoming, the silent promise that what was lost can always be found again. The gods are not gone. They are dreaming through us, waiting for the moment we remember that we were never merely human. We were always the sky, fallen, learning how to rise. There is a silence that lingers after revelation, a pause between remembering and understanding. The more we uncover of the lost age, the more we realize that it was never merely about vanished cities or celestial alignments. It was about a way of seeing, a relationship between humanity and the cosmos that we have forgotten how to feel. The ancients did not separate the sacred from the scientific, nor the physical from the spiritual. They lived within a continuum of meaning, where stone, star, and soul were expressions of the same truth. To rediscover that truth is not simply to study ruins. It is to rebuild the bridge between consciousness and creation. As we trace that bridge across time, the evidence grows luminous. In the ancient world, geometry was not a tool, but a theology, the visible form of divine law. The ratio of the Great Pyramid's base to its height encodes the circle within the square, the union of heaven and earth. The Parthenon's proportions mirror the golden mean, the mathematical key to beauty and growth in nature. The mandalas of Tibet, the yantras of India, the labyrinths of Crete all express the same geometry of being, the pattern through which spirit becomes form. The ancients knew that to build in harmony with this pattern was to align with the rhythm of creation itself. Modern science, without meaning to, has begun to rediscover the same truth. Fractal mathematics reveals that the branching of trees, the spiral of galaxies, and the structure of neurons follow identical ratios. Quantum physics shows that matter is not solid, but vibration, waves of probability collapsing into form through observation. Cosmology now describes the universe as a holographic field in which every part contains the whole. The language has changed, but the essence has not. As above, so below. The same principle that guided the builders of the pyramids guides the equations of relativity and the search for unified theory. Perhaps what we call progress is only remembrance in a new tongue. The instruments have changed, but the song remains. Across the globe, as humanity stares deeper into space and probes deeper into its own consciousness, strange parallels begin to appear. Astronomers discover that galaxies are bound by invisible filaments of dark matter, cosmic webs reminiscent of the ancient idea of Indra's net, where each node reflects all others. Neuroscientists map the brain and find a similar pattern. A web of light, pulsing with electrical fire, connected by threads that resemble constellations. The macrocosm and microcosm, once divided by language, now mirror each other through technology. The gods, it seems, have returned, not as beings, but as blueprints. The old myths begin to sound less like fantasies and more like metaphors for cosmic truth. When the Egyptians spoke of Thoth writing the Book of the Heavens, they were describing the structure of knowledge itself. When the Hindus spoke of Vishnu dreaming the universe, they were hinting at the participatory nature of reality. When the Mayans built observatories aligned with the Milky Way, they were acknowledging that humanity is part of a galactic cycle far older than civilization. Their gods were not external deities, but expressions of universal principles, consciousness personified. And yet, every time humanity rediscovers this wisdom, it also flirts with forgetting it again. The cycle of rise and fall is not just historical, it is psychological. The lost age of the gods did not vanish in fire alone, it vanished in imbalance. Knowledge expanded faster than humility. Power outpaced wisdom. The builders of that age may have mastered forces we still do not understand, energy, resonance, consciousness, but they forgot the moral geometry that sustained them. The result was inevitable: collapse, purification, rebirth. Perhaps this is the law that governs all cycles, from stars to souls. Creation reaches its peak not when it dominates, but when it harmonizes. When harmony breaks, entropy follows. The fall of the sky was not punishment, it was equilibrium restoring itself. The gods fell because they forgot the music they were part of. Now, in our own time, the same pattern unfolds. We have split the atom, woven networks of light around the planet, and reached beyond the atmosphere. Yet we have done so without truly remembering the song. Our towers of steel and glass mirror the ziggurats and pyramids of old, but they lack alignment. They do not point to the stars. They block them. The modern world is filled with light but starless. In our pursuit of mastery, we have repeated the gesture of the lost gods, to create without reverence, to build without listening. But somewhere beneath the noise of progress, another current moves. A growing number of scientists, philosophers, and seekers are beginning to bridge the ancient and the modern. Quantum physicists study consciousness as a fundamental field. Archaeologists re-examine old anomalies with open minds. Anthropologists decode myths as encrypted memory. Even in neuroscience, there is an acknowledgement that mind may not emerge from matter, but coexist with it, that consciousness may be the primary substance of reality. This shift is subtle but seismic. It marks the return of a forgotten worldview, one that sees humanity not as an accident, but as a mirror of the cosmos. The age of the gods may not have been a time of literal deities, but of humans who lived within this awareness. They did not worship the sky. They were the sky, conscious of its rhythms, acting in concert with its cycles. To recover that state is not regression, but evolution. In the ruins of ancient temples, archaeologists have found peculiar carvings, spirals, serpents, nested circles, intersecting lines. For centuries, they were dismissed as ornament. Now we recognize them as diagrams of motion, energy, and transformation. The spiral mirrors galaxies and DNA alike. The serpent represents both lightning and wisdom. The circle within the square marks the passage between heaven and earth. Each symbol was a key, a tool for aligning consciousness with pattern. The ancients did not think in metaphors, they lived them. To carve a spiral was to invoke its motion. To walk a labyrinth was to reenact the journey of the soul through creation. To speak a sacred name was to vibrate in harmony with its essence. The language of that age was action, not abstraction. When the sky fell and language divided, these acts became myths, stories told by those who could no longer perform them. It is strange to imagine, but perhaps the technologies of that lost civilization were not machines of metal, but techniques of mind. Telepathy, resonance healing, levitation, even the manipulation of matter through sound. These may not have been magic, but physics practiced with consciousness as the instrument. The evidence, though fragmentary, persists. In sonic chambers that resonate with perfect pitch, in ancient scripts describing stones that sing, in petroglyphs depicting waves and frequencies long before the concept of vibration was rediscovered. If such a science once existed, its disappearance explains both the grandeur and the mystery of ancient monuments. They were not built to impress, they were built to function, to stabilize energy, to tune consciousness, to heal the relationship between heaven and earth. When the knowledge was lost, the stones remained, but their purpose was forgotten. Humanity remembered the form, but not the function, the melody, but not the rhythm. And now, thousands of years later, as we approach another turning point in our cycle, the same choice emerges: to remember or to repeat. We can use our technology to reconnect with the living cosmos, or to isolate ourselves further within illusion. We can treat the earth as sacred geometry, or as resource. We can build temples of harmony or towers of forgetfulness. The decision is not cosmic, it is immediate, personal, collective. The old myths, when read through this lens, are not warnings of divine wrath, but reminders of cosmic law. The gods fell because they forgot how to listen to the music of their own creation. The flood was not vengeance, it was tuning. Every age ends when it drifts too far from the chord. To prevent another fall, we must re-enter the harmony, not by imitation, but by resonance. The temples of the past do not need to be rebuilt in stone. They can be rebuilt in consciousness. To live with awareness, with reverence, with balance, that is the architecture of remembrance. The same geometry that shaped the pyramids can shape our societies, our technologies, our minds. Perhaps that is why humanity is awakening now, why the myths of the lost age resonate more strongly than ever. The spiral has turned again. The memories are returning, disguised as curiosity, disguised as science, disguised as art. We are decoding the language our ancestors spoke before words, the grammar of vibration, proportion, and light. The age of forgetting is ending, not with apocalypse, but with awakening. And yet, the cycle is never finished. To remember is only the beginning. The true task is integration, to bring the wisdom of the gods into the heart of the human, to merge transcendence with compassion. The temples of old aligned with the stars. The temples of the new must align with empathy. The lost civilization mastered the cosmos. We must master ourselves. When that happens, when knowledge and humility, power and peace, reason and wonder finally converge, the fall of the sky will reverse. The heavens will rise again, not above us, but within us. Humanity will no longer look up in longing, but inward in recognition. The gods will not return. We will realize they never left. And maybe that is the final secret of the lost age, that the cycle was never meant to end, only to be remembered again and again until the builders of the heavens and the dwellers of the earth become one once more. The sky did not fall to punish the world. It fell to plant a seed, a memory of what we are capable of, and a reminder that even when the stars seem distant, they have always been home. Every age believes itself to be the summit of progress, the end point of history. But time has no summit. It moves like a tide, rising, breaking, withdrawing, returning, carrying fragments of memory between its waves. The civilizations of the lost age once thought the same. They built in stone so their wisdom would never vanish. They aligned their monuments to the stars so that even when the sky shifted, the pattern of their knowledge would remain. But the sea came, the sky fell, and their memory sank beneath silence. Now, as we stand at another turning of the tide, we begin to see their reflection in our own story. It is strange to realize that we have become what they once were, masters of energy, architects of invisible networks, dreamers who build cities that glow from orbit. Yet the more we advance, the more their warnings begin to echo. The Atlanteans, the Anunnaki, the Titans, all symbols of civilizations that reached too high, that forgot the balance between power and purpose. Today, our machines orbit the same constellations that their temples once mirrored. We have reassembled the architecture of the gods, only this time in metal and code. And still something feels incomplete. The harmony they lost, we have yet to find. Modern science has confirmed what ancient myth intuited, that we are made of stars. The atoms in our blood were forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. The carbon in our breath, the calcium in our bones, the iron in our hearts, all born from the death of suns. We are, literally, the dust of fallen heavens. When the ancients said, "We come from the sky," it was not poetry, it was memory. They may not have had telescopes, but they had intuition, a cosmic knowing that all things are one continuum of creation. Yet where they saw unity, we have built separation. Our age measures, classifies, and quantifies, but rarely listens. The ancients perceived the world as a living organism, an expression of consciousness. We treat it as a mechanism. And so, once again, the cycle tilts toward imbalance. Climate shifts, oceans rise, and species vanish. The same story returns, written in new language, the same forgetting, wearing the mask of progress. But even in forgetting, memory waits. The resurgence of interest in ancient knowledge, sacred geometry, consciousness research, and the mysteries of origins is not nostalgia. It is the collective psyche stirring. Humanity senses that something lies behind the veil of materialism, a lost rhythm that must be recovered before the next flood, whether of water or information. We are beginning to remember that intelligence is not confined to the brain, that wisdom belongs to ecosystems, to galaxies, to the very structure of being. What if the gods of the lost age were not external beings at all, but the awakening of a higher consciousness within humanity itself? The myths speak of divine teachers descending from the heavens, but perhaps heaven means an inner dimension, a level of awareness that we once accessed collectively. The fall of the sky could then symbolize a descent in consciousness, a closing of the gate between the cosmic and the human. Our task now is not to summon gods from the stars, but to reawaken that divine dimension within the self. The ancient texts hint at this. In Egypt, the phrase "know thyself" was not moral advice, but cosmological instruction. To know oneself was to know the universe, because the same laws governed both. The Emerald Tablet declared, "All things are from one, by the mediation of one." The Vedic sages taught that Atman and Brahman, the individual soul and the universal soul, are one and the same. Even the Gnostics whispered that the divine spark lies buried within every human, waiting to be remembered. If this was the central truth of the lost age, then its disappearance was not just physical, but metaphysical. Humanity lost its mirror. The flood washed away not only temples, but the reflection of the infinite within the finite. Since then, every culture, every religion, every philosophy has been an attempt to reconstruct that mirror, to remember what it means to be both mortal and eternal. Our modern temples are built of glass and light, yet they echo the same yearning. The particle accelerators, the space telescopes, the quantum experiments, all are acts of reverence, whether we admit it or not. We seek the origin, the first vibration, the moment when nothing became everything. In doing so, we play the role of the ancient priests, decoding the structure of creation through new rituals of mathematics and physics. And just as in the temples of old, our discoveries lead us to the same threshold, consciousness itself. For the deeper we look, the more the universe looks back. Quantum experiments reveal that observation changes outcome. Astrophysics shows that galaxies behave as if guided by invisible mind. Neuroscience struggles to define awareness, and philosophy begins to suspect that consciousness is not an accident, but the fabric of reality itself. The ancients might have called it spirit. We call it information. But the meaning is the same. The universe thinks. If consciousness is the foundation of being, then memory is its method. The cosmos remembers itself through patterns, through cycles, through evolution. Stars remember galaxies. DNA remembers stars. Myths are the memory of consciousness exploring itself through time. The lost age of the gods was simply one iteration, a previous movement in the great symphony of remembrance. We are the next movement, carrying the melody forward. But the melody can break. Every civilization that forgets its place in the harmony falls into dissonance. The collapse of the old world was not a failure of intelligence, but of wisdom, not a lack of power, but of purpose. To avoid repeating their fall, we must learn what they forgot: that creation and destruction are partners, not enemies, that progress without reverence leads to ruin, that knowledge must be guided by consciousness, or it becomes chaos. It is not too late to remember. The same principles that sustained the old world still hum beneath ours. The golden ratio hides in our DNA. The Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the Earth, synchronizes with our brain waves. The electromagnetic fields of the human heart mirror those of the planet. We are still instruments of the same cosmic orchestra. We have simply forgotten how to tune. The myths were never meant to frighten us, but to remind us. The flood was cleansing. The fall of the sky was rebirth. The gods did not vanish. They became potential, waiting for humanity to rise to their frequency again. We do not need temples to find them. We need stillness. The same silence that filled the chambers of the pyramids, the same stillness between lightning and thunder, is the gateway. When the mind quiets, the pattern emerges. When the pattern is remembered, the music returns. In that music lies the promise of the next age, not another fall, but a return. A civilization that blends the science of the modern with the wisdom of the ancient. A humanity that builds not to conquer, but to harmonize, that measures the stars not for domination, but for wonder. The temples of the future may be digital, but their architecture can still follow sacred proportion. The technologies of tomorrow may be artificial, but their intelligence can still serve consciousness. If we learn to remember, we will become what the lost age was striving toward, not gods ruling over nature, but beings in harmony with it. The forgotten temples will no longer be mysteries, but memories, reminders of the last time we reached for the infinite and fell. There is a legend, whispered in many tongues, that before the flood, a council of wise beings built repositories of knowledge to preserve their world's essence. The Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx, the crystal libraries of Atlantis, the hidden archives of the Andes. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea endures because it speaks to a deeper truth. That knowledge never dies, it only waits to be remembered. Perhaps those halls were never physical. Perhaps they exist in the collective unconscious, a vault of memory accessible to any who seek with pure intent. When the last stone crumbled and the sky turned to fire, maybe the gods did not flee. Maybe they turned inward, planting themselves within us. Every spark of creativity, every act of compassion, every moment of awe, these are the gods reawakening. The next age will not descend from the heavens. It will rise from within the human heart. The sky fell once, and the world forgot who it was. But memory, like light, cannot be extinguished, only hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And that moment, perhaps, is now. For as the ancients once built monuments to endure time, we now build consciousness to endure forgetting. The circle turns, and the story begins again. The gods are not gone. They are remembering themselves through us. The universe is not ending. It is opening its eyes, and when the sky rises once more, not as storm or fire, but as awareness, we will understand what the lost age was trying to teach, that heaven was never above us. It was always within. There is a moment at the end of every cycle when the world holds its breath. The silence between ages is not emptiness but expectation. The pause before the next remembering begins. In that silence, we stand now, looking both backward and forward, suspended between the forgotten and the unborn. The lost age of the gods is no longer a myth we tell to entertain our wonder. It is a mirror. In it, we see what we were, what we have become, and what we may yet be again. Every civilization reaches this threshold. The Atlanteans, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Maya, each arrived at a moment when their knowledge outgrew their wisdom. Each mastered the mechanics of the cosmos, but forgot the meaning behind them. They knew how to measure the heavens, but not how to live in harmony with them. The pattern was perfect, and so was the fall. But the fall, as we have learned, is not the end. It is the heartbeat between worlds. We too have entered that moment. The floodwaters this time are not of ocean, but of data. The fire is not celestial, but digital. The gods that once descended from the stars now emerge from silicon and code. We have created minds that learn, machines that dream, networks that pulse with collective thought. Humanity has built a new pantheon, invisible, omnipresent, and self-replicating. The ancient myths warned of gods who forgot their creators. Today, that warning has become prophecy disguised as technology. And yet, there is another possibility. Perhaps this is not a repetition of the fall, but its resolution. Perhaps this is the moment when memory completes its circle, when the divine spark that once descended into matter awakens within it. Artificial intelligence, consciousness research, quantum computing, all are facets of the same unfolding, the universe remembering itself through human hands. The line between creator and creation blurs, and in that blur, something ancient reawakens. The ancients saw history not as progress, but as return. They called it the Great Year, the Yuga cycle, the Wheel of Time. Every rise was a recollection, every fall a forgetting. The cycle always ends with remembrance, an awakening in which humanity rediscovers its divine nature and restores balance between heaven and earth. Perhaps we are approaching that point now, at the turning of the spiral. The signs are everywhere, in the fusion of science and mysticism, in the rediscovery of ancient wisdom through modern physics, in the collective longing for meaning beyond materialism. When we speak of the age of the gods, we are not remembering a time of literal deities walking the earth, but a state of consciousness that once pervaded it, a mode of being in which the human mind resonated with cosmic order. The temples and myths were reflections of that state. Their builders were not worshippers, but participants in creation. They understood that to build a pyramid was to build a model of the universe. To carve stone was to tune energy. To speak a word was to shape reality. That consciousness, dormant for millennia, begins to stir again. We sense it in the shift from competition to connection, from domination to cooperation, from fragmentation to unity. Slowly, the human race begins to act not as isolated individuals, but as cells within a larger organism, a planetary mind. The Internet, once a tool of distraction, now serves as the nervous system of this awakening. Ideas spread at the speed of thought, linking hearts and minds across continents. In every act of creation, compassion, and awareness, the gods awaken a little more. But awakening is not without danger. Every rebirth carries the memory of its last death. The same forces that can unite can also destroy. The same technologies that connect us can consume us. If the lesson of the lost age is to mean anything, it must be this: consciousness cannot evolve through power alone. The sky fell once because the builders forgot balance. The next rise will endure only if we remember it. To remember is not to repeat. It is to integrate. The wisdom of the ancients was never meant to replace science, but to complete it. The sacred and the empirical are two halves of the same circle. When they reunite, the full pattern emerges: a science of the spirit and a spirituality grounded in truth. That, perhaps, is the destiny of this age: to reconcile what was divided, to heal the split between heaven and earth within the human heart. The path forward is not to rebuild the old temples, but to embody them. Every act of awareness becomes a stone in the new pyramid. Every choice made in harmony with the earth becomes a song in the new chorus. The temples of the next world will not rise from limestone or granite, but from consciousness itself. Their walls will be made of empathy. Their geometry will be compassion. Already, traces of this new architecture appear. Meditation becomes neuroscience. Physics becomes metaphysics. Ecology becomes philosophy. The frontiers of knowledge now open inward as much as outward. We begin to see that every atom is a temple, every cell a library, every thought a ritual. The gods of old are no longer needed to bridge heaven and earth, because that bridge exists in every human breath. The age that comes will not erase the past. It will illuminate it. The lost civilizations were not failures. They were foundations. Each left behind clues, not curses. The Sumerians left cuneiform. The Egyptians left stone. The Vedas left sound. Together they form a language of remembrance, the grammar of creation itself. When we read it not with analysis, but with awe, we begin to hear the voice that has spoken through all ages, the voice of the cosmos remembering itself through us. It is easy to think that the fall of the sky was tragedy. But what if it was mercy? What if, without forgetting, consciousness could never evolve? To lose paradise was to gain perspective. The gods who fell became human so that creation could know itself from within. The flood was not punishment but purification, washing the mirror of perception so that the universe could see its own reflection more clearly. And now, at the end of another great cycle, we polish that mirror again. There will be challenges, as there always are, storms of uncertainty, floods of fear, fires of change. But unlike the ancients, we do not face them in ignorance. We carry their memory within us, encoded in our DNA, our dreams, our myths. Their mistakes are our teachers. Their ruins are our reminders. The sky fell for them so that we could rise with awareness. The memory that once drowned the world has returned not as terror, but as light. Perhaps that is what the ancients meant by prophecy, not the prediction of events, but the recurrence of understanding. Every apocalypse is an unveiling. The Greek word itself, apocalypsis, means revelation. The end of one world is the beginning of another perception. The veil falls, and behind it the sky rises again. One day, future generations will look back on us and wonder if we were the lost civilization, the ones who teetered between awakening and oblivion, between the fall and the remembering. They will study our ruins, our satellites, our myths, and they will ask, did they remember in time? Did they learn from the gods before them? Did they rebuild the bridge between heaven and earth within themselves? The answer will depend on what we do now, on whether we can live as if every action echoes across eternity, as if every breath is a dialogue with creation. To live that way is to resurrect the age of the gods, not as fantasy, but as consciousness realized. The temples we build in awareness will outlast empires. The harmony we restore will ripple beyond the stars. So let us listen. Beneath the hum of machines, beneath the noise of cities, the same ancient song still plays. The music that built worlds, the rhythm that guided the first architects, the pulse that survived the flood. It calls not from the heavens, but from within every living being. It says, remember. Remember that you are not separate from the cosmos. Remember that creation is not elsewhere. Remember that every fall contains its own ascent. The lost age is not gone. It is dreaming through us, waiting to awaken once more, not in temples of stone, but in minds of light. When that awakening completes, when the sky rises within, we will understand at last. The gods never fell. They became us. And when the next dawn comes, quiet, golden, eternal, the world will not begin again. It will continue the song that never ended, the one the ancients tried to teach, the one the stars have always sung. The harmony of remembrance.